As consolation prizes go, this one was acceptable. That is the team we expected to see all year. They showed fight, determination, grit, intensity, hustle, and they fought till the very end.
You are Locked On Oklahoma State, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma State Cowboys, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Howdy, y'all, and hello, all. Welcome back to Locked On Oklahoma State, your daily stop for all things Cowboy and Cowgirl related. My name is Cody Stovall. I want to thank you kindly for stopping by to make this your first listen. We're available on all of your podcasting platforms, visually as well on YouTube. Find me personally on X at AllDayOState. Today, we are partially brought to you by Gametime Tickets. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Make sure that you get squared away with the best tickets in the land today with Gametime Tickets. Meanwhile, we shift into this game that, of course, ended up not going in the win department, but the Cowboys make a change at quarterback. And shout out to all the regulars, aka regulators out there. If you watched last week's shows, you weren't super surprised by Maealiuaki Smith being out there, but nonetheless, it didn't make sense to me to not at least throw Alan Bowman out there for the first couple series, it being the senior day. So, yeah, it's very perplexing why we decided until the second to last game of the season to make a change at quarterback. But clearly the team responded very well. Now, defensively, Brian Nardo's got a lot to correct. But I'll also tell you, I sat in the section right behind the goalpost with a lot of the recruits and stuff. And by and large, the guys who have met Brian Nardo absolutely love him. The guys who've just met Justin Gordon cannot wait to meet Brian Nardo. So continuously, the younger guys gravitate towards Brian Nardo. And when Brian Nardo has a full complement of the guys that he feels like is going to fit his system the best, I think that's when we can all pass more judgment on Brian Nardo. But if you want to pass judgment on Nardo for this game, you can do that. And it's kind of, upsetting because in the first half, going into the third quarter, we'd given up a handful of long touchdown drives, but outside of that, the defense was playing pretty well. Second half, a little bit of a different story. It ended up being a little bit of a battle between Maealiuaki Smith and Baron Morton. Baron Morton got the better hand, although Maealiuaki Smith had a good account for himself, 343 yards as opposed to Baron Morton's 401 yards. But he did have a higher QBR at 84 as opposed to Baron Morton's like 78. And he was also better in yards per completion per clip. He was almost at like 11 yards per completion. So Maealiuaki Smith definitely did a lot of things to help inspire the team, so much so that Ollie Gordon finally kind of went back to old school Ollie Gordon mode and put up 156 yards on just 15 touchdowns. So he was able to outduel Taj Brooks, who had 133 yards on almost 30 touches. So we were able to outduel one of the best backs in the Big 12 with one of the best backs in the Big 12. The entire offense seemed to conduct themselves considerably differently with Maealiuaki Smith out there. And, from a defensive perspective, you had to respect the wheels of Maealiuaki Smith, because if you didn't, he was going to do exactly like he did and take off and score from 30 yards out. He has that threat to neutralize some of the numerical advantages that defense can have when they're in the game against Alan Bowman. This was the team that we thought we'd see all year, with all of the returning upperclassmen and the returning starters and almost 90% of the roster. If we'd had shown this amount of fight all year, we're obviously having a completely different conversation about where this team sits and what the future could look like. But at least we got to see a glimpse of the future. When it comes to the future component at quarterback for Oklahoma State, guys, Alan Bowman was not the best quarterback on this roster all year, nor was he the second best or the third best or maybe even the fourth best. So I think what needs to happen is a conversation on why did Alan Bowman get put into the game over and over and over again when it was clear that the guys behind him were more suited to run this style of offense. But at least we got the fight and we got to see the future. So whether it's going to be Zane Flores or Garrett Rangel or Maealiuaki Smith, we're in good hands. That's been a frustration for me this entire season is, and you guys likely know, dating back to spring and fall, Alan Bowman did improve some things in the pocket, but to me, still didn't look like the best quarterback on the roster. So Mike Gundy has made the decision at some point in time in the season to continuously go with Alan Bowman, and it was detrimental to the team. This is the fight that we anticipated seeing throughout the course of the season. And now that we got it, I think it's fair that we can all look forward to the future and be excited when guys like Maealiuaki Smith, and of course, everyone is very intrigued to see what Zane Flores could potentially do. But every time guys like David Kabongo and Lando Cleveland and Josh Ford were able to showcase themselves in the games, it just added more layers of questioning. And I think this one does as well. With Maealiuaki Smith going in, what's the justification for him not playing the week before this or the week before that? And we will likely never get that justification. But we can look now forward to the future. You could factor in Rodney Fields as well. And I know Jacoby Sanders isn't a freshman anymore, but whenever he would get in, it looked pretty beneficial. The youth on this team was always athletically as prepared as the seniors. But the cerebral side of the game obviously is going to take a little bit of time for the younger guys to get to. But to me, this does give us a little peek behind the window or the curtain to what the next season could be. And every time, maybe not every time, but virtually every time we saw a true freshman this season, we were all pleasantly surprised. And oftentimes it led us to say, well, then why is this guy starting? And now we got to see that yet again with Maealiuaki Smith getting an entire game. It didn't take very long for people who had been chomping at the bit, to stay with Alan Bowman. Even that crowd knew pretty quickly that this is just a different ballgame. So I think this experience this season should garner more questions than ever before. But at least we did see a glimpse of what this future team could potentially look like. And we're about to lose a decent number of guys. So, yeah, you have the 26 that are graduating, and then you have a handful that are going to likely go pro, right? Your Nick Martins, your Colin Olivers, your Ollie Gordons. And then transfers do happen. And whether we're going to be on the high side like a couple of years ago where we have 25 transfers, or we're going to be on the low side like last season where we only had like 8 transfers, maybe you could split the difference and say it's going to be somewhere in the middle. So if that's the case, the numbers game is going to be very, very worth the watch throughout the entirety of the offseason. Not to mention, you do have to find a way to make sure that you get to that 105 scholarship number. Now, I will admit that I think that's being blown a little bit out of proportion because I haven't heard anybody else in the Big 12 complain about the number being an issue, unless you're talking about like the financial constraints. But again, the financial capabilities in Stillwater are not so minuscule that we don't know what to do with ourselves. I mean, look at what we're paying the coaches. It's not like we're the bottom of the barrel when it comes to budget. Now, are we at the top? No. But this fallacy that Oklahoma State's going to have more trouble than everybody else in getting to that 105 number from a monetary side of the equation, I think it's a little bit of a building in of a future excuse, if you ask me. Is it going to be an issue? Yeah. Is it going to be as big as an issue as we're making it out to be? No, I don't think so at all. What I do think is you need to make sure that you already have tickets so that way you don't have to deal with the added stress that typically can come with it, right? The travel, the hotels, the rental cars, all of that stuff, it can add up and it can make life extremely stressful when adding tickets on top of it doesn't need to be, because Game Time Tickets has the Game Time picks that make it easier for you to find tickets for your favorite team to play much easier. It's going to filter out all the fluffy stuff so you just get the most incredible deals without having to search through thousands of tickets for thousands of minutes. Game Time Picks is what is going to make it easier for you to save more on sports, concerts, music, theater, whatever the case may be. They've got you covered. The panoramic seat view is the best in the business, and you know exactly where you're sitting before you buy. The Game Time ticket coverage is the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. Plus, they'll credit you back 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of you buying any tickets with Game Time picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege, all one word, for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply, but make sure you create that account. Redeem that code LOCKEDONCLLEGE for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today because you already know what time it is. It's game time. All right. Too little, too late. Again, I think that the entirety of the season should be a case study on what not to do. So why wait until the season's way over before you start Maealiuaki Smith? It doesn't make sense because every player has the 4 games that you can play that don't get counted against your redshirt capabilities. So the logical thing would have been to start Maealiuaki Smith a couple weeks ago, but that didn't happen. And instead, we continue to roll with the status quo, which is obviously what a lot of us were afraid of because of what it was going to equal. And what it has now equaled is Oklahoma State not going to a bowl game for the first time in almost 20 years. For all of the greatness that Mike Gundy has brought to Oklahoma State, I'm not going to sit here and pretend that he hasn't. He is the GOAT, the greatest coach of all time at Oklahoma State. I just personally think that seasons like this are not just a one-off, right? There's been multiple times that we've had some issues come up in regards to Mike Gundy. And I'm not even always talking about the comments that he makes, because some of the comments that he makes, I actually ride with till the end. So it's not necessarily the comments more often than not that trip my trigger. Now, of course, the only people complaining are the ones who can't pay their bills, feed their families type of thing. That comment, obviously, I took exception to, as I think most of the fan base did, but it's not going to equal anything. We're not going to do anything. And so I want to understand what goes through Mike Gundy's head. I think a lot of us would love to know that. But to me, for whatever praise that we're going to give for making the move, we should also pass condemnation, because logically, it doesn't make sense to not start Maealiuaki Smith multiple weeks ago, just like it doesn't make sense to start Maealiuaki Smith on senior day. Like, if there's one game this season where I would have been all about Alan Bowman taking the field, it would have been for senior day. If there was one game, right, preseason that I carved out for Alan Bowman, it'd have been senior day. Now, of course, if you're in contention for something, that changes the landscape here. But when you're in contention for nothing and you haven't been playing the best quarterbacks all year, why are we starting to the second last game of the season? And furthermore, what example does that send? Right? I think it's fair to at least question, why has Alan Bowman played all year when it didn't make sense? The same question needs to be asked about Kendall Daniels. Why are some of the biggest issues continuing to not only get playing time, but get praise? And I understand Kendall Daniels, he'll make a crazy play, but then he'll get lost in the hogwash in 4 or 5 plays in a row that result in a touchdown, and then he'll go make another crazy play. So we cover up all of the ridiculous laziness with the great plays that he'll make occasionally. And to some degree, that might even be applicable to Alan Bowman, because it's not like he's completely inept at being a quarterback. He does at times do some pretty wild things, and he can make some pretty intense upper level throws occasionally. But am I the only one? I cannot be the only one that is equally as happy to see Maealiuaki Smith as I am infuriated to see Maealiuaki Smith. Like, this whole season has been, I'm not at a loss for words often, but this is just, to me, another example of why we should have more questions asked, as opposed to just giving Mike Gundy or anybody else, including Casey Dunn, a pass. Like, how do we get to this? And who makes the decisions other than Mike Gundy on who's going to start at quarterback? We know it's not Casey Dunn, and we dang sure know it ain't Tim Rattay. Too little, too late. what can Mike Gundy say that makes any level of sense? So here's why I waited till the season was already over. I don't know. I mean, it is what it is. I am very well aware when you owe somebody $26 million and they're the most legendary coach of all time, they ain't going anywhere. But that's on Chad Weiberg, I believe, right? Because Mike Holder, sure as all get out, wasn't giving Mike Gundy a contract with 75% buyout. Before Chad Weiberg, Mike Gundy's buyout was 25%, not 75%. And then Chad Weiberg comes in and Mike Gundy gets the most sweetheart deal of all time, 75% of buyout. Well, no wonder he's being reckless with his mouth. He knows we can't do anything about it. No wonder he's being reckless with the roster and who's starting and who's not even playing at all and who's probably going to transfer because they got screwed out of having an opportunity this season because an upperclassman was ahead of them that happened to be getting NIL dollars, so they were always going to play no matter what. Too little, too late. And I guess I'm in the minority here because I'm done with the fluffy stuff. And I feel like this whole season has been a lot of fluffy stuff for Mike Gundy. But I get it. He's going to get a pass. He's going to get more time. It is what it is. But I do think that the Mike Gundy till death do us part crowd should at least be somewhat introspective because we now know Mike Gundy's likely not going to be introspective. I'll be honest with you, like seeing the offensive coordinator at Utah step down and some of these other situations across the country, I almost wondered if maybe Mike Gundy sits down and says, you know what? I love this university. I bleed for this brand. And what I'm doing, it's not good enough. It's not working. I need to check my ego out the door. I need to examine the new landscape of college football and make sure that I fit within it. And if I don't, I need to be honest with myself about the direction of the program. But that ain't going to happen because he even said his wife isn't going to let him retire. So if we go 3-9 again next season, I don't know. I don't know what we do. I just don't see the outlook as super positive. At least we can say this. There's nowhere to go but up when you're dead last and 0-8, right? So I guess if there's a silver lining, that is it. But in my opinion, making this move is more of a slap in the face than anything. Why wait until the season's way over before you start making moves that made sense weeks and weeks and weeks ago? Mike Gundy fancies himself as the smartest man in the room, but he has not been the smartest man in his own office with other coordinators or other coaches this season. There's just no way. There's no way Mike Gundy can look at film and say this is going to work. This has been successful. Casey Dunn has been a good hire as an offensive coordinator, but it keeps happening over and over and over and over. And a lot of people still want to give Mike Gundy more passes. I'm just not one of them. I'm accepting that he's going to be the coach again because we can't afford anything else. Doesn't mean I have to be happy about it. I can happen to be happy about potentially making some extra money, and FanDuel is going to allow that to happen, especially with all the NFL Cowboys that have been making waves. Malcolm Rodriguez just got the game ball for the Lions. Justice Hill scored a touchdown. Then you have Jalen Warren over here scoring touchdowns. This is a good time to rock with the Oklahoma State Cowboys in the NFL. And right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 back in bonus bets if it's a winner. The FanDuel Sports app gives you everything you need to place live bets on NFL action all in one place. When you get that tingling sensation in the middle of the game that something crazy is about to happen and the game's about to get flipped on its head entirely, you can now check out the latest stats, view the live play-by-play, and so much more from the same page where you place your bets from. Make sure that you visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 back in bonus bets if your first $5 bet is a winner. Make sure that you visit FanDuel.com today. Never waste that hunch in the middle of the game when you can make every moment matter more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Now we get to go back to some of the positivity of being in Stillwater this weekend. Well, actually, I went to Wichita, got to watch the Friends Falcons win their first ever playoff victory. I did not know that. I know we'd only won a few conference titles, but I didn't realize that was our first W in the playoffs. So shout out Coach Harrison and the Friends Falcons for moving on to round 2. And then I hauled to Stillwater, Oklahoma. I'm glad I did. And the whole time I was thinking, I hope the game's close because I know I'm going to miss the first half. And it was. It was close. It was a hard-fought ball game. And then I got to get in there and have some awesome conversations with a lot of the recruits in that section. So there's a lot of positivity to glean from that ball game. And then Sunday, let's go check out wrestling. And this team is third in the country in scoring points, third in the country overall in rankings. The biggest match we're going to have, or duel this season, is likely going to be the duel against Iowa. Currently, Iowa's definitely going to be favored, but we've got some potential opportunities to mix it up here. Now, I watched the Wyoming duel on TV, and then obviously I got to watch the Arizona State duel live and in person. And there's a couple weights that I have some concerns with. I'll be honest with you. Like, I went into the Arizona State wrestling match asking some questions to some diehard wrestling people about what their thoughts were on Cam Amin. Because from what I'd seen this season, the multi-year All-American at Michigan wasn't really showing up on the mat, especially whenever you have everybody out there doing their damnedest to make sure they score a lot of points. This is what David Taylor wants. This is the same thing that Cale Sanderson at Penn State wants. Points. That's how you're gonna get over the top, is to continuously score more points. And occasionally you can be so aggressive that it puts you in a bad spot, right? We've seen that happen a couple times this year for Dustin Plott. He's such a good wrestler. He's always able to recover and end up winning. But Cam Amin. And another thing that's perplexing for me at this particular weight is the weight of David Taylor. So if David Taylor is getting Cam Amin prepared, then why are we still seeing a Cam Amin that doesn't have the ability to score points? And then the other concern for me was Carter Young. Carter Young being a Stillwater guy, of course, I'm going to root for him, cheer for him. Him originally going to Northwestern and then us being able to talk him back into coming home, always going to be big. But again, there's two guys on this roster that don't really seem to carry that same sense of urgency in trying to score points, and that's Cam Amin and obviously the Stillwater High guy. And when you look at Carter Young, he fought admirably, but that pace, the intensity, the ability to end up in scrambles and turn them into points, it just doesn't seem to be there with those two guys. And so the wrestling people out here who know 30,000 times more than I do, feel free to let me know down in the comments section. What about those two individuals am I seeing incorrectly? I'm not going to pretend to be a hardcore wrestling savant. I don't even barely know how all the points get scored. And they just recently changed some of the rules. So it's a lot to keep up with. But I do know that going to John Smith matches quite often growing up and even recently, he's more of a defensive tactician. David Taylor's not that. David Taylor is a let him up and go score more points. Now let him up again and go score more points. Constantly pushing the pedal to the metal. But we have two wrestlers that seem to be incapable of doing that, or maybe they just don't have the offensive repertoire. And as it pertains to Carter Young, it's different weight, right? So maybe it makes some sense. But I just can't fathom how we can have one of the greatest 165-pounders in the history of the sport in the wrestling room, virtually every day, wrestling with these guys. And one of them that is the same weight is the one guy who was supposed to come in as a big-time All-American that's just not getting it done. He's not scoring points. He's not being aggressive. I don't get it. And I know we wanted to redshirt Caleb Fish, but you can't tell me that Caleb Fish couldn't go out there and be more aggressive than Cam Amin. Cam Amin seems to be wrestling, I don't want to say scared, but he's certainly not being aggressive or pushing the pace or trying to score a lot of points. I think the same could be said to some degree about Carter Young. And I know Cutter Sheets is filling in, but dude, that's awesome. That's a really good feeling to have. Talk about somebody that does the exact opposite. He's always pushing the pace. He's always trying to make some stuff happen. And we have a lot of those ways. Troy Spradley's that way, right? Taking Jameson can be that way. And then Wyatt Hendrickson, his difficulty is just going to be there's a couple dudes like Gable Stevenson at his weight that are going to be very difficult come NCAA times. But more often than not, Wyatt Hendrickson is going to have an easy time most of the year. I have been very impressed with him. His athleticism and everything, it just kind of it jumps to the roof. Cale Hughes, if he can stay at 133, could be great. But then you have some other issues, obviously, with Teague Travis being out for the season. That is going to force some more opportunities for Cutter Sheets. And then is Reese Whitcraft really going to be one of the guys? It's still a little bit up in the air. Thankfully, it's early in the season, but I will say it was pretty fun. And the crowd was reasonable. This wrestling squad is worth the watch. And so I'm really glad that I was able to check him out. Cross country had a little bit of a disappointment. Shout out to BYU. Congratulations on winning the national championship in cross country. A repeat performance from winning last year's title obviously didn't happen. And we fell from first to second to eighth, which is very uncharacteristic of a Dave Smith squad. So that's a little perplexing, but nonetheless, right? Shout out to Dave Smith squad. You're going to be fine. And Cowgirl basketball, yeah, you know what? We'll talk about that tomorrow because they put up 113 points and had so many people in different figures, right? Rebounds and blocks and steals. It's a game you expect to win, of course, but this JC Hoyt team, they've got some teeth. And they're going to be a problem. Men's basketball, we had a decent showing of ourselves, right? Going 500 on the road at the Charleston Classic. Not bad. We beat a pretty decent Miami ball club. And then we looked we looked decent in games, but that's okay because my objective this season for Steve Lutz was to play hard, play aggressive, play tenacious ball, and take care of GIA. If you can get everybody to flood GIA again for basketball, and you can take care of the home floor, whatever happens on the road, whatever happens throughout the course of the conference season, I think all of us will be able to take it with a grain of salt. Just play nasty basketball and take care of Gallagher Iba Arena. The rest will sort itself out as time goes on because we're just not an offensive ball club. Our defense is going to keep us in a lot of games. Our ability to get in transition and get steals and get points off of steals is going to keep us in ball games. And then there's going to be days where we do shoot well. And those days, we can hang with anybody and pull off some upsets. But if there's games that we don't shoot well, we're not going to win. It just is what it is. But that's okay because we're getting this fight, right? The same fight we saw with the football team. You see it in basketball. And it seems pretty consistent. In Lutz, we trust. At least so far. I've been pretty happy with the sample size. All righty, y'all. That's all we're going to have for this one right here. As always, I love you. God bless. Go Pokes. Thank you for tuning in to make this your first listen here in Locked On Oklahoma State. Like it if you like the daggone thing. Dislike if you don't. That's okay, too. Shout out to my friends Falcons, Coach Harrison. Appreciate your time. And, they treated me absolutely phenomenal when I was in Wichita. So I cannot wait to see some more Friends University football. All righty, y'all. That is all. You know the drill. Later, my taters.